The other thing is President Putin has been very eager for this meeting. He wants to meet with President Trump, and he wants to meet because he is essentially a pariah in the West.
Well, we appear to be at a pivotal moment in two conflicts: escalation in Gaza and maybe, just maybe, a step towards peace in Ukraine. In Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu's cabinet have approved his plans to occupy the entirety of the Gaza Strip, whilst a summit between Presidents Trump and Putin is said to be taking place at the end of next week. However, there are reports that the Russian-American plans involve freezing the conflict along current lines, a condition opposed by Ukraine and Europe. William B. Taylor is a former US ambassador to Ukraine and also worked on Israeli disengagement from Gaza and the West Bank for the US. He joins me now to discuss both conflicts. Good evening to you.
Good evening, Kathy. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us here on Times Radio. Let's just start with that Russia-Ukraine conflict first. Who do you expect to emerge as the victor if and when a meeting takes place between Putin and Trump?
I think President Trump has a lot of leverage over President Putin. You've already talked about the sanctions that President Trump has threatened to put on the two biggest buyers of Russian oil, that is India and China. But President Trump has also indicated and has really resumed the flow of weapons to Ukraine. So President Trump has the leverage. The other thing is President Putin has been very eager for this meeting. He wants to meet with President Trump, and he wants to meet because he is essentially a pariah in the West. He is an indicted war criminal.
Well, he
wants to get back in.
I mean, several things to unpick there from what you've said. I don't want to be cynical, but you talk about Trump having leverage. Has he not just failed to use it because he's ducked this deadline of today for imposing swinging sanctions on Russia? And then when you say Putin was eager for this meeting, I mean, you could listen to the former Russian Prime Minister, Mikhail Kasyanov, who I spoke to earlier on the programme. He was saying that he wants the meeting in order to sort of string Trump along and, string out the war.
He does. No, I agree with Kasyanov. Putin does want to string out this war. He's not interested in a ceasefire. He's not interested in ending the killing, as President Trump has said over and over is his goal. That's right. But I also believe that the leverage comes to Trump because Putin does want this meeting. He wants this meeting, yes, to string him along, but also to show that Putin is back at the big table. I think there's the leverage there that President Trump can use.
Do you think then that Trump needs to use that leverage on sanctions, relatively rapidly, or has he got to wait and hear what's to be said in this meeting if and when it happens, and then if he's not satisfied with it, he's then got to hit him with sanctions?
Kathy, to be clear, Trump has already imposed sanctions on Russia by sanctioning India. Because the Indians now, it turns out, are the largest purchaser of Russian oil. They have overtaken China in that regard. Both the Chinese and Indians buy a lot of Russian oil, and Trump has put sanctions 50% on all of the Indian exports to the United States because India buys that oil. So Trump has already imposed the sanctions in the form of tariffs on India. You're right.
Okay, but could he do so?
The next step to do on China.
Yeah, well, exactly. When does he move to that next step, and when does he impose much more swinging sanctions?
He can do it anytime. I mean, he can do it anytime. I have no idea what his plans are in terms of the tariffs, but he has got that. He's already done it on India. He has already provided the Ukrainian with a flow of weapons that he had been hesitant to do. So he's used the leverage that he's gotten so far.
We're hearing reports that one of the proposals on the table is to freeze the conflict along the current territorial lines. That would be terrible for Ukraine, wouldn't it?
It would not be terrible for Ukraine, actually. If it's just a ceasefire, if we're talking about a final settlement of this war, then that's another issue. But if on a ceasefire, the right thing to do, or the logical thing to do, is to stop ceasefire along the existing line. Now, of course, the Russians don't want that. The Russians want to go more than, they want more than the current lines. That's not going to happen. But no, stopping the fighting along the existing lines, stopping the air war, that is stopping the bombardment every night of Ukraine by the Russians, and stopping the fight on the sea, which the Ukrainians actually are winning. That ceasefire, just a simple ceasefire on air, land, and sea, that would be fine along the existing lines.
But with a view, presumably, to restoring territory to Ukraine at a later date.
Absolutely correct. Absolutely correct. There would be no recognition of the Russian illegal annexation, occupation of Crimea and Donbass. That would be subject to a long-term conversation about a negotiation about the end of the war, along with accountability and returning all of the POWs and reconstruction. Those are long-term issues that need to be addressed. Right now, they got to focus on the ceasefire.
Well, you also worked on Israeli disengagement from Gaza and the West Bank. So let's talk about the other conflict that's clearly top of the news agenda today. There's been global condemnation about what Netanyahu is proposing in terms of taking over Gaza City. That's really not going to bother him too much so long as he has US support. Isn't that right?
I suppose, but that support, he can't count on it. I mean, there's a lot of indication that there is exasperation, frustration, dissatisfaction with a lot of the decisions that this Israeli government has been making. You're right. I was there earlier. I was in Israel, in Jerusalem, for a year in 2004, 2005, 2006. And that was the time when the Israelis decided to get out of Gaza. They decided they couldn't stay there. And now the Israeli government is talking about going back in and staying for some period of time. There was a mistake for them to be there in the first place, which they remedied by pulling out, and it would be a mistake to go back.
Well, I mean, Netanyahu has been clear he doesn't want to hold on to Gaza. So what happens next after he's taken control of Gaza City and beyond? What do you see the sort of day after plan being?
So apparently he's talking about some Arab force that would come in. It may or may not have other Arabs and Egyptians and others as participants. It may have Palestinians being a part of that. That's the right question, though, Kathy. That is the right question. What happens after the Israelis go in and occupy again? I mean, they occupy a lot of the territory right now, but to go in on a semi-permanent basis or a time indeterminate of them pulling out, that's a different story, and that's the different question. That's a difficult question for what happens next.
Yeah, I mean, do you think that it's remotely credible what Netanyahu is proposing there, given that he's scotched the idea of the Palestinian Authority having anything to do with any sort of future governance in Gaza?
Palestinians have to, in the end, govern themselves. Palestinian Authority can either change or be put in charge together with other Arab forces, other nations. But in the end, the Palestinians are going to have to govern that state themselves.
I mean, the UK and several European governments are taking a different approach, recognising Palestinian statehood to try and breathe new life into a two-state solution. Do you see that, the two-state solution that's long been the objective of many governments around the world, do you see that as effectively dead now?
I don't think it's effectively dead. As you say, the vast majority of nations around the world have recognized Palestine as a nation. And as you say, the Brits and the Canadians, French are talking about doing that as well. So you certainly can't say it's dead. And it's not clear what the alternative is. What is the alternative that anyone has in mind? So no, I don't think it's dead.
William B. Taylor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kathy.